At the 100th anniversary celebration of our family empire, my grandfather raised his glass and announced, "Let's all applaud the hard workers who will never lead." He looked directly at me as everyone roared with laughter. I smiled, stayed silent for 25 years, slowly acquiring every key asset. When I triggered a final sell-off, the family business collapsed overnight. Every building with our name was bulldozed, statues were melted down, and future history books simply labeled our dynasty as defunct due to incompetence. His great-grandchildren were forced to change their last name just to be hired anywhere. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was 22, and our family empire Beckley Corporation was turning 100. That night, I learned what humiliation felt like. Not the kind you get from a personal mistake. The kind that's handed to you by your own blood with a smile. We were at the top floor of the Three Rivers Tower. Black tie event. Over 300 people packed into that room, politicians, corporate heads, media, extended family. Anyone who mattered was there. My grandfather, Silas Beckley, stood at the head table in his tailored tux. At 71 he was still sharp, strong, and full of the pride only men like him carried, men who believed legacy meant dominance. He raised his glass. To a century of Beckley blood shaping this city. To the builders, the leaders. Everyone clapped. He held up a hand. Silence. "Let's also raise a glass," he added, pausing for dramatic effect. "To the hard workers who will never lead." People looked around, confused. Then he turned his head, stared straight at me. I was standing with a drink in my hand, right under one of our golden plaques, the one that read "A Century of Strength." I saw the smirks, heard the slow ripple of laughter, then the full wave. Uncles, cousins, executives, all laughing like it was the best joke of the night. I smiled, didn't flinch, didn't look away. That was the moment I changed. They thought I was just the quiet one, the middle kid of the second son. Not flashy, not loud. I didn't chase women, cars, or drugs like the rest of them. I listened. I watched. They mistook silence for weakness. What I really was patient. The next day I showed up at work like normal. No one said anything.
No επάλεγει. No explanaschen.
That kind of insult wasn't meant to be explained. It was meant to stick. I spent the next few years working in the financial planning department. Low level. Purposefully unimportant. I did my job well, but I never volunteered for more. I didn't want the spotlight. I wanted space to move. By the time I turned 30, I'd quietly started 3 holding companies. Each one had a different name, different purpose. I used them to buy up shares not just of Beckley Corp, but of our suppliers, our tenants, our subcontractors. Any company that had a contract with us, I wanted a piece of it. No one noticed. The shares were small, spread out. I never used my own name. Over time, I built leverage in the shadows. Meanwhile, my cousins fought over titles. My uncle Drew, who'd taken over after my grandfather stepped down, ran the company like a king. He handed out executive jobs like party favors, fired experienced staff and replaced them with yes men. He bought a yacht and started hosting company retreats in the Bahamas. It was embarrassing, but perfect, because every stupid decision they made my plan easier. I didn't move fast. That's what kept me invisible. From 2005 to 2015, I bought out the owners of 3 of our biggest supply chain partners. Quietly. I used old-school contacts, lawyers with good memory, and brokers who owed me favors. I changed contracts behind the scenes, renegotiated terms. Little by little, Beckley Corp. became dependent on companies I controlled. I also started collecting real estate. Beckley Corporation was heavy in properties, office parks, shopping centers, even 2 stadiums and a hospital wing. I bought properties next to theirs. I bought their maintenance companies. I took over their property managers and security firms. I kept my head down the whole time. They still thought I was just Cousin Mark, the guy who never wanted a promotion. In reality, by 2018, I had controlling interest in over 45% of the company's contracts. Then came the mistake that cracked the foundation. In 2019, my cousin Jamie used company funds to settle a harassment lawsuit. He was VP of Strategic Growth. He wasn't just a sleaze, he was sloppy. The story leaked. Our stock dropped 8% in 2 weeks. Not a huge collapse, but enough for panic to set in. They started cutting budgets. selling off non-core assets. That's when I struck. Using one of my holding companies, I offered to buy one of the buildings they wanted to offload, a former medical research facility in West Mifflin. I offered above market. They sold it to me without a second thought. That was the first domino. I used the same tactic to buy more old warehouses, commercial lots, and used land parcels. I even made bids for their branding agency, their legal consultants, their IT infrastructure vendors. The more desperate they got, the faster they sold. They still had no idea who they were selling to. By 2022, my combined entities owned 38% of Beckley Corp's total infrastructure, and I controlled 52% of their vendor supply chain. It was time. The 125th anniversary was approaching. I knew they'd want to celebrate. I made sure of it, dropped anonymous hints through connections, encouraged PR talk about reviving the legacy, leaked old photos to local journalists. They bought it all. They planned a massive statue unveiling downtown. Right across from the Beckley Library, my grandfather, now 96, wheelchair-bound and half senile, was set to attend. That's when I called a shareholder meeting. With my combined silent shares accumulated over 25 years through proxies, trusts, and layered shell companies, I introduced a motion to liquidate the company. No restructuring, no sale, just a straight end. The board looked around like they just heard a bomb go off. They scrambled, tried to figure out who was behind the motion. I stood up and said just 5 words. It's me. I own everything. Silence. The vote passed. 81% in favor. I watched my Uncle Drew's face go white. I saw my cousin Jamie put his head in his hands. My grandfather? He didn't even react. He didn't know where he was anymore. The fallout didn't happen overnight. But it started fast. Within a week, news broke that Beckley Corporation was dissolving. Local business stations scrambled. Talk radio lit up. No one could believe it. A company that had stood for over a century just gone. Employees panicked. Some were angry. Some were relieved. The smart ones saw the writing on the wall and started looking for new jobs. I made sure regular workers got decent exit packages. The execs? They got nothing. Just like the loyalty they'd shown. The board begged me to reconsider. They offered me the CEO role. You can steer the company in a new direction, they said. We'll step down. I told them it was never about leading. It was about ending. Still, not everything went as planned. My cousin Brian wasn't dumb like the others. He'd started his own firm on the side years ago, a tech consulting group that Beckley Corporation quietly funded. I hadn't realized how big it had gotten. When the company collapse went public, he made a move. He offered to buy back parts of the business, said he'd restore the name, and honor the family's legacy. The media loved it. Youngest Beckley aims to save what's left. I couldn't let that happen. I dug deep into his company's records. Found out he'd been laundering funds through shell clients. Fake contracts. I leaked everything to a journalist I trusted. Anonymous tip. Clean and fast. The story hit 2 days before his press conference. His investors pulled out overnight. The IRS showed up the following week. His business died before he even got the chance to make his pitch. One more Beckley down. But not all of them stayed quiet. Uncle Drew wasn't done. He filed a lawsuit, claimed my buyouts were done under false identities, said I manipulated the market, tried to get a federal injunction to stop the liquidation. He underestimated how much dirt I had on him. I had emails, videos, old tax documents, a phone recording from 2012 where he threatened a whistleblower. I sent it all to his attorney in a sealed folder. The next day the lawsuit was withdrawn. But it wasn't over. A few board members who still held minor shares tried to launch a PR war. Claimed I betrayed the family, destroyed jobs, humiliated a legacy. So I released a documentary, one I've been filming for over 5 years. It was called The Price of a Name. It showed everything. The backroom deals, the nepotism, the harassment settlements, the arrogance, the entitlement. By the end of the hour, anyone watching knew the truth. The Beckleys didn't deserve to be saved, but the consequences weren't just public. Some of the family lost everything. Second homes were sold. Trusts dried up. My cousin Lucy got divorced because her husband didn't want to live like a normal person. One of my aunts moved to Florida and started working part-time at a dentist's office. She changed her last name within 6 months. The worst came when the last statue came down. It stood outside the original Beckley steel plant, now just a concrete lot. I stood there as the crane pulled it apart. The wind was cold. There were no reporters. No crowd. Just me and the demolition crew. The nameplate clanged against the pavement. One of the workers looked at me and said, "Hell of a name. What happened to them?" I said, "They forgot what mattered." He shrugged and got back to work. I stayed a few more minutes. Then I left. 3 months after the company folded, something unexpected happened. I got a letter. Not an email. A real letter. Handwritten. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. It was from my grandfather. Dated 2 years earlier. Started with, "If you're reading this, I'm probably gone or close to it. I'm not sorry for what I said. But I know you." He went on to describe the night of the 100th anniversary. How he knew I was the only one who paid attention. How he purposely humiliated me in front of everyone, not because he thought I was weak, but because he knew I was the only one who could take a punch and wait to strike back. The others, they would have gotten angry. Fought back loud. That's not leadership. That's panic. You stayed still. That's why you're dangerous. That's why you're the one. He'd seen it all coming. He didn't stop it. He let it happen. Said the family had grown soft. Entitled. And maybe they needed someone to burn it all down so something better could be built later. I sat with that letter for hours. I didn't know if it was sincere or manipulative. Felt like both. That was always him, control disguised as wisdom. But the ending of the letter stuck with me. I destroyed this family with pride. Maybe you destroyed it with purpose. That doesn't mean you're right. But it means you're not like them. And that's enough for me. I never told anyone about the letter. I shredded it the next morning. Then came the last holdout. There was one asset left no one knew about. A small offshore trust in the Cayman Islands set up by my grandfather in the 80s. It didn't show up in our corporate audits. It wasn't listed in any family trust documents. But I found it during a deep scan of our archived legal files, buried in a binder labeled Miscellaneous, International. Inside was $38 million. Untouched. The beneficiary? Me. He'd put my name on it when I was 12. I don't know if it was some kind of game, or if he always saw this day coming. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was part of his sick idea of legacy. I didn't take the money. Instead, I transferred it all to a local fund I'd set up anonymously to support startups run by first-generation Americans. Kids who came from nothing. Kids who had to fight for a seat at the table. The same kind of fight I had. Only I didn't want them to wait 25 years to get even. But then something I hadn't planned started to happen. I began hearing from old employees. Not family, real workers. Receptionists, engineers, site managers. People who had put in 20, 30, 40 years. They weren't angry at me. They wanted help. Turns out, in the rush to shut everything down, some pensions got frozen. Others were lost. Drew had used shell accounts to reroute benefits to cover debts before I called the vote. These people were scared. Some were sick. Some had kids in college. And even though I hadn't caused their pain, I had the power to fix it. So I did. I used my own money. Quietly. I rebuilt pension lines. Covered gaps. Created new paths through local credit unions. Never told them who I was. Just made sure their checks arrived. But word still got out. And that brought attention I didn't want. A local journalist started digging. Young guy. Hungry. Smart. Too smart. He started connecting dots, old property records, LLC names, silent partners. He traced everything back to me. One night he showed up outside my apartment. "I don't want to smear you," he said. "But this story needs to be told. What you did, it's like something out of a movie. People need to understand." I told him the truth. I didn't do it to be noble. I did it because I was humiliated. He paused, then said, "Maybe. But you made things better. Even if you did it out of anger." I let him publish it. The article hit the front page of the Pittsburgh Gazette 2 weeks later. The silent hand that undid a dynasty. Some called me a hero. Some called me a traitor. The Beckley name was back in headlines, but not the way my family ever wanted. I didn't plan for what came next. The article blew up. National news picked it up. Podcasts, morning shows, business analysts, they all started picking apart the story. Everyone wanted to talk to me. Former employees, investors, people who'd been screwed by the Beckleys decades ago. For a minute it felt like justice. But then the vultures came. People I hadn't spoken to in 20 years started crawling out of the woodwork. Old high school friends.
Ex-girlfriends.
Distant cousins who once called me the quiet disappointment. Suddenly they wanted to reconnect. Have lunch. Talk about healing. It made me sick. Even worse were the business offers. Venture firms, tech CEOs, political figures, people who thought tearing down a legacy made me some kind of asset. I turned them all down. But the pressure kept building. And then I made my own mistake. I agreed to do one interview. Just one. It was a live segment on a popular podcast. The host framed it like a personal redemption story. I should have known better. Halfway through the interview he hit me with this. So was it worth it? You erased your own name. You ruined your family. Do you feel powerful now? I paused. Too long. That silence got clipped and shared everywhere. People said I hesitated because I regretted it. The truth? I didn't know anymore. I thought I'd feel done after it all. But instead I just felt empty. I'd built my entire life on slow revenge. And now, I had nothing left to chase. The backlash came fast. Some of the people I'd helped, former employees, pensioners, started getting dragged into the spotlight. The press kept twisting things. Said I was buying redemption. Said I'd used them to soften my image. It wasn't true. But it didn't matter. In the public's eyes, I was just another rich guy playing puppet master. The real breaking point came when I got a call from a woman named Carla. She was the daughter of one of our old security guards, James Mendel. He died in 2017. I remembered him. Always kind. Treated me like a person, not a name. Carla had a daughter with leukemia. Their insurance lapsed. Her father's Beckley pension had been one of their only lifelines. When we liquidated, it disappeared. And somehow I'd missed that file. I don't want money, she said. I just wanted you to know. That crushed me. I wired her enough to cover everything. But the damage was done. I realized I'd been so focused on destroying the Beckleys, I hadn't done enough to protect the people they left behind. And maybe that made me no better than them. Then came the final blow. The city council voted to rename Beckley Street, the last thing in town that carried our name. It would now be called Founders Lane, in honor of small business owners. A reporter asked me for comment. I told her, good. They should have done it sooner. But that night I drove to the street sign. Just stood there. Watched the city workers unbolt it. Toss it in the back of a truck. One of them looked at me and said, "You Mark?" I nodded. He said, "Guess you finally got what you wanted." I didn't answer. Because I wasn't sure I had. A month later I sold everything. The businesses. The properties. The last shell company. I gave most of the money away. And then I disappeared. Changed my name. Moved to a small town in northern Oregon. Opened a modest bookstore. Nothing flashy. Just me, the shelves, and quiet. Some days people recognize me. Ask if I'm that Beckley guy. I tell them no. They usually believe it. But sometimes, when someone asks what I used to do, I tell them. I used to tear things down. And if they push, I just say some names aren't worth saving. Then I go back to stocking the shelves. Because revenge might feel good. But peace? Peace is something you have to rebuild from the ashes. And I'm finally ready to start building.